Hi, good afternoon. My name is Shasta Curl, Richmond City Manager. Thank you all for joining us today. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, but also want to make sure that if we have community members present and if you have any questions, please know that feel free to ask questions throughout the meeting. We want to make sure that this is an interactive process and that you have an opportunity to have your questions and concerns addressed in a timely manner. So today we're going to go over our organizational structure. We're going to talk about the budget process itself. And we are also going to spend some time talking about some of our financial highlights and accomplishments, because I think it's really important that when we're thinking about how we're going to spend the public's revenue, that we also highlight the great work that you all have been completing in your various departments. And so the public is aware of the great work that's been happening in their community, because these expenditures and these budgets actually can transform people's lives. They get to go to community spaces or ride a transportation shuttle, or as Mary, addresses things with storms. And we have our corrective action plan with the state audit. So there's just a number of things that everyone is involved with throughout the city in terms of our expenditures that then help create a lovely community here in Richmond. So just want to thank all of you for that. For those of you that are not familiar, this is our City of Richmond, our current organizational chart. We have a council manager form of governance. That means myself as the city manager, our city attorney, and our city clerk all report to the city council. The council also has the confidential investigative appeals person, and the City of Richmond also has the rent program that has its own board, but that works in tandem with our community. On the left-hand side, you'll see community services, which is led by Deputy City Manager White. And you can see the various divisions there. We also have police chief, fire chief, our director of community development, which is Lizette Beecham, who is in court right now dealing with an RHA matter. We also have community development, which is led by Ms. Velasco, our director of public works, which is led by Mr. Chavarria, and I see Robert Armijo here, who's our deputy public works director, who recently joined our city team. So pleased to have him here today. And also deputy city manager for internal services, Nikki Mastay, is here as well to assist in answering questions.
Thank you so much, City Manager Shasta Kerr. I was just saying that this is a slide where I come in. So this slide actually describes or tells a little bit about the budget document, what it is. First of all, it's a policy document that shows what the policy guidance that City Council has given to the city staff to implement their direction towards the community programs. It's a financial plan, how the funds will be raised to fund those programs that are serving the community. And it's operations guide for the staff. The staff gets direction from the budget about the programs, to which direction these will move, and how those will be funded. At the same time, it's a communication device for the staff, for the community, and the city council. So you can tell that many different moving parts bring this budget book together, and almost every city staff member is part of the development of this budget book. This slide shows some of the budget financial highlights that recently the city has experienced. One of those is the City of Richmond improved its Moody's credit rating to A3, and the city ended the fiscal year 21-22 with increased unassigned general fund balance, as known as reserve, which is above the policy target range of 15 to 20%. So at the end of 21-22, the calculated unassigned reserve level was 21.75%, which is about 1.75% above the policy target range. The city adopted a balanced budget on June 21st originally, with $206 million general fund budget, and the non-general fund expenditures of about at the media that became like $308 million non-general fund revenue, and at the mid-year general fund revenues were $215 million. So that was a balanced general fund budget. It is a big accomplishment of the city, which the city has been having for past few years, and it continued to have a balanced budget this 22-23 fiscal year budget as well. And another accomplishment, the city staff does a great job in terms of like seeking funding from various agencies, federal, private, and state. Currently, the city has about $166 million worth of grant funding from various grantors. Big kudos and congratulations to the City of Richmond staff. Yay, go Team Richmond. Thank you. Well, thank you all, I mean. City of Richmond recently refinanced pension obligation bonds from interest swap to fixed rate bonds. It's sort of like, you know, having a flexible rate mortgage versus fixed rate mortgage. So over the years, city is going to have a significant amount of savings from this change. And the city also had a state audit. And as a result of the state audit, the city was given about 11 recommendations, which the corrective action plan was submitted to the state, and the implementation of those recommendations is in progress. And that's one of the major focus of the finance staff, and along with many other stakeholders of the city.
Thank you, Mubin. So in terms of some of our accomplishments, many of you have been involved in some capacity or another in terms of helping get our housing authority back on track. And so really excited that the Hacienda development, for those of you who aren't aware, recently reopened. And so we completed the rehabilitation with Mercy Housing and Community Development Corporation. And so really excited that we have residents now living there, and 25 of the residents from Hacienda were part of the coordinated entry program. So that means that people who were previously unhoused now are able to have housing at Hacienda. So want to thank all of the staff that have been involved with that. The Booker T. Anderson Community Center is also currently under renovation. Unfortunately, there was a fire there, and the facility was damaged, but we're really excited that the construction has commenced and it's going to be back online. Carlson Crosstown Connection construction is in progress. And the other thing that I want to lift up is that City of Richmond, all of the staff, there's over 95 boards, commissions, committees, or nonprofits, groups that city staff meet with regularly. And so just wanted to take an opportunity to acknowledge that and to thank you for all of the outstanding work that you do in collaboration with community stakeholders. We've continued to have various I Heart Richmond cleanup events, and those are going well. There's the picture here that you see is in Parkchester, where there's a mural painting that took place, and also the Parkchester Center, the improvements there are nearly complete, and will be reopening imminently. In 2022, right now, there's an estimate that we had approximately 917 agenda items in eScribe. And that's important to note because a lot of what our work involves is getting agenda items before the council for expenditures and to seek policy direction to help operationalize things citywide. Another thing that I think is really important to always highlight is the construction that's in progress in our community. So according to the community development team, this is a brief summary of what is in the pipeline. So there's the Country Club subdivision, and 94 above moderate income, which means market rate, are being constructed. There's 17 very low income units and an SRO on Barrett Avenue. That's the silver. You are driving down Barrett and you see a big metal construction. That's that development there. There's also approved residential in the pipeline in Brickyard Cove, the Quarry subdivision, also the Renaissance Apartments and supportive and family apartments on 38th Street. So one of the other thing that's important to note is our community continues to outperform the region in terms of developing and maintaining affordable housing. And so really want to thank the city council for their policy direction there and ensuring that Richmond continues to do our share regionally. And in terms of heading over to our goals, I'm going to hand it back to Nubin, and he's going to take it from here to talk about our 23-24 goals.
Thank you, City Manager. So one of this slide lists major fiscal year 23-24 budget year goals. So first of all, the budget has to be structurally balanced. That means the revenues for the general fund should be either or must be actually above or equal to the expenditures. So that also means like the ongoing revenues of the city should be above or equal to the ongoing expenditures of the city. So no one-time money should be used to fund the ongoing operations. So that's one of the goals. Also, continue to evaluate service levels. Do we have sufficient level of service offered to the community? Are we lacking somewhere, or are we focused strategically enough to get the maximum value out of our funds? Do we need to reevaluate those levels and assign and allocate those resources strategically? That's another goal. And also maintain bond ratings. Having a balanced budget is actually one of the major pieces to maintain the bond rating. If we go out of balance, that immediately impacts our bond rating. Invest in built environment and facilities. That means cities' infrastructure and facilities that are that have a lot of significant amount of deferred maintenance and declining paving index. The city's budget must address and allocate funding to restore those areas and make some investments. At the same time, emphasize on fiscal sustainability. Like, we not only look at the next year, but also in the long term, like how the budget should be in line with the long-term fiscal sustainability, like not just 1 year, but just going beyond 1 year, 5 year, 10 year. Like, what are those actions that we need to take right now to basically make the city sustainable in the long run? Are we headed towards the right direction? Are we heading towards the fiscal cliff? Or what are those fiscal headwinds that we are heading towards? We need to keep all that in mind as we move along in the budget process. And the next slide is about the timeline, about the budget process. So the convention is annual budgets are initially developed with the input from all departments. All departments are invited to enter their budgets, their routine baseline budget, their ongoing operations into the system. And then those budgets are reviewed and discussed through various internal meetings with the city manager's office, finance, deputy city managers, and department heads. They meet on individual basis. Individual means department staff and the city leadership meets and discuss all the budgets that are entered. And then the other area is community feedback, which part of that is like today's presentation. The other meeting we had with the Richmond Coordinating Neighborhood Council on April 10th, that was first of the series. Today is the second of the series, and the third meeting would be with the community on April 20th. And there's also one meeting, such meeting with the bargaining units on April 28th. So these meetings are arranged to collect feedback and input from all these stakeholders. At the end of the day, City Council makes final decision regarding the budget appropriations. So here are the key dates of the current budget year's budget calendar. The budget process was kicked off on January 26th, where the department staff was provided with the guidance and training also, like on how to enter the budget and everything about it. And then departments enter their budgets in the first week of February, few weeks of February, from January 30th through, I think, February 23rd. I can't see the date here. Then budget hearings where the department staff, departments and the city manager and deputy city manager and finance department meet and discuss budget. Those were like through March 13th through March 23rd. These community budget meetings, April 10th, 17th, and 20th. And the unions meeting is on 28th, as I mentioned earlier. And the first draft for the 23-24 budget would be presented to the city council on May 2nd. And after that, there will be several presentations to the city council about the budget, and city council's feedback and direction will be received by the staff, and final budget will be adopted by June 30th. Not after, but before June 30th. This is the slide where I will hand over to Antonio Manolis, our accounting manager.
Good afternoon. Antonio Banuelos, accounting manager in the finance department. I'm going to go over some revenue numbers here for the general fund. Right now, we're focusing on the 22-23 mid-year that was adopted by city council a few weeks back. The 23-24 numbers will be out shortly. They'll be, for some of these, will be slightly increased. For many of these, will be about the same number. If we focus on the top three, property tax, sales tax, and UUT, those have historically been the main three revenues for the city of Richmond. In the past, they were over 80% of the general fund revenue. They've gone down a little bit because other revenues have gone up. Right now, those top three make up about 72% of the mid-year revenue. If we add other taxes, which includes the documentary transfer tax, that's gone up significantly in the last couple of years because of a voter approved measure that changed the rates. We include that, that's now at 83%. Also recently, a couple of years back, voters approved Measure U. That also increased the business license tax revenue. Prior to the voter approval, it was around 3 million. Last year was over 8 million, and it's going to go up probably a little bit more this year. Now, if we add what we call the operating transfer in, which is another property tax that also increased the amount going into the general fund this year because of the bond refunding that Mubin mentioned. Those main revenues, that's over 90% of the general fund revenue. That's the majority of the money that we get. I'm going to go more specifically into a couple of revenue streams here. This is the property tax distribution. For property owners in Richmond, everybody knows about the 1% on your property tax bill. Of that, Richmond only gets 28.5%. The vast, almost half of it goes to educational institutions. For using an example, a property valued at $500,000, the 1% tax is about $5,000. Of that $5,000 that you pay, schools get about $2,400, county gets about $700, and the city of Richmond gets about $1,425. So of the $5,000 tax bill, city of Richmond gets about $1,400. Here, we're going to focus on sales tax. The sales tax rate in Richmond is 9.75%. And of that, Richmond gets 2%. So every city gets the 1% we call the Bradley Burns. That's every city in California gets that 1%. But in Richmond, voters approved two half-cent measures, Measure U back in 2005 and Measure Q back in 2015. So those two plus the Bradley Burns takes us to 2%. The rest goes to the state or different regional items. So when you pay sales tax, only 2% comes to Richmond. The rest goes to other items. Unlike property tax and sales tax, utility user tax, whatever's paid by somebody in Richmond comes 100% to Richmond. We have several different UUTs, telecommunications, which has historically been going down. People are getting rid of the landlines, consolidating, getting cheaper telephone services. That's been going down for the last 20 years. Prepaid wireless is a really small amount. That's the amount that people get cards at stores. Video, which is basically cable at 5%. That's also been going down recently. People are going away from cable and getting Netflix and some other items that currently aren't taxed. And gas and electricity, that one has been going up significantly. We've all seen our PG&E bills. It seems like it's going up 10% every year. Another one that we have here is a tax settlement. So about 15 years ago, there was a tax settlement between the city of Richmond and Chevron. It was over $100 million, but it's winding down. We have a couple more years left of Chevron paying the city $4 million. Finally, we have what we call the cap provision. This is an amount where any business in Richmond can pay and not provide us the information. The only one company I use, that's Chevron. They're currently paying about $29 million this year. Goes up every year based on a very specific energy services CPI. And it's going to go up another 10% next year at least.
Thank you, Antonio. This slide shows, this pie chart shows distribution of the general fund expenditures. At the midpoint, the city of Richmond's general fund budget had total expenditure of like about $215 million. And you can see on this pie chart that one of the top expenditure is personnel, salaries, and wages. Following the top one, it's the fringe benefits, which is also part of the payroll and personnel costs. Then there is professional services and other operating. After that, transfers out, which is a general funds subsidy to or allocations to other funds and programs. For example, some of the prominent programs are Department of Children and Youth, employment and training, reimagining public safety transfers out to employment and training again, and then also cities share to the districts, Marina and Hilltop districts. So those are some of the major transfers out that we have. And after that, we have a cost pool and utilities and debt service and capital outlay. So this is the breakdown of the general fund expenditures. This slide again is pretty similar to that one, except that it's in a table format. And you can see that the city adopted the original budget with $206 million. And then at the mid-year, it was about $215 million that was approved on March 28th. So that's the slide that basically is the same as the previous one. And you can see the top the ranking of the expenditures, salaries and wages about $79 million, fringe benefits about $67 million, professional and admin about $18.6 million, and so on. And you can see that the transfers out are about $17.8 million. This slide shows the total expenditures of the general fund by a major function of the city. For example, you can see the public safety is about 51% of the city's total general fund budget of $215 million. And public safety is basically police and fire. Following public safety, it's public works, which is about 17%, which is like all the streets and engineering facilities and parks and roads and all that cool stuff. And then there's non-departmental. Non-departmental is, again, those transfers out that I just mentioned are basically tracked in non-departmental. And some of the other costs are like, citywide payments to other post-employment benefits or vacation payouts and the city halls of safety and all those other things that are not in particular specified to a department, but they are tracked for the whole city. So that's where the non-departmental sits. And then we have community services, about 7% of the general fund is expended, which is library, recreation, Office of Neighborhood Safety, transportation, and programs like that. Then there is general government, which is like city manager's office, city clerk's office, mayor's office, and city council's office. So these are the major general fund expenditures based on the volume shown in a pie chart. And this is basically the bar chart, which shows what the original appropriation in terms of the budget was by category, then what the revised budget was as of December, and how it changed to proposed change to the mid-year budget. So there's not major change in terms of percentage. As you can see, like the original budget was $206 million, and at the midpoint, mid-year approved budget was $215 million. So there's, in terms of percentage, it's not significant. This is again the same type of chart, which shows the original appropriation budget for expenditures and how it was started by each category, and then how it ended up being at the midpoint, the proposed mid-year, or approved mid-year rather. So again, the change is not rather significant, from $206 million total to like 215. So it's not much different in terms of percentage. This slide shows the total revenues versus expenditures and what the net what the net impact is, for example, like revenues over expenditures. So we see that the budget was adopted in the original appropriation column with $206.6 million revenues and $206.6 million in expenditures on June 21, which was when the budget was adopted for 22-23. And we see in the column proposed mid-year, which is the second to last to the right. I'm a little dyslexic in that sense. So we see that the approved mid-year revenue budget was $215 million, and so were the expenditures at $215 million. And the budget was balanced at mid-year. And you can see the percentages of total budget with respect to each category, if you're interested. Now, this pie chart shows the total non-general fund budget. Need to see. Total non-general fund revenue budget, which is $216 million. And this pie chart shows like what are those, that $216 million of non-general fund, what are those type of funds? So these are the roll-up categories of funds. For example, capital improvement funds has a list of funds that are tracked as capital improvement. These are the funds where all those capital projects are tracked. Some of those examples of the funds are gas tax and Measure J, general capital fund, and also a developer impact fee funds, which are all capital improvement funds. So those are all tracked in this category. The other operations funds will be like transportation or some of the other city operations that we have, and that are tracked in this category. And special revenue funds would be, for example, Department of Children and Youth, or the other one of the other example is the disaster recovery fund. Then there is enterprise funds. These are the funds that are business type funds. For example, port operations would be one of them, and wastewater district fund would be a part of that. The debt service funds are where we track all the city-owned debt. We hold those costs in certain funds, and we transfer funds in those funds, and then those are debt services are debts are serviced through those funds. Then there are pension funds and internal service funds. Internal service funds are basically the funds where, such as risk management fund will be there, and also equipment replacement fund is also part of that. How it works is like in the city, if a city needs to buy a vehicle, a department needs to buy a vehicle, the city would transfer funds into this equipment replacement fund, and then it will be purchased through that internal service fund. Then we have Richmond Housing Authority funds and housing funds. These are, this pie chart shows the expenditure of two non-general funds by all those categories, and total funds at the mid-year was like $308 million. And you can see all those categories and their respective percentage within the total non-general fund budget. These are the same categories as on the previous slide. So we found some efficiencies there. So this slide is about American Rescue Plan Act, and I would invite Deputy City Manager LaShonda White.
Thank you, Mubin. Okay, once again, I'm LaShonda White, Deputy City Manager for Community Services, and here to talk to you about the American Rescue Plan Act. So the City of Richmond received $27.7 million from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan Act, which also is known as ARPA here. And we have received the full installment of that revenue. So it's sitting with us for our use. And our city council are the ones that make the decision in terms of how we allocate those funds. The funds have to be encumbered or allocated by the end of 2024 and then fully spent by the end of calendar year 2026. So we have a few more years to be able to plan on how to spend the remaining dollars that we have, as well as and see the outcome of those projects. So if you are familiar with the federal government, you know that they have provided us with lots and lots of reading for our own enjoyment and pleasure. And so there's lots of guidance and reporting that we have to do. So we're really excited that we have some additional help through a consultant to provide some technical assistance to city staff to help us make sure we do everything right. And I also want to thank finance staff for all their help in making sure our reports get in on a quarterly basis. Here is a high-level snapshot of the revenue we receive, which is 27.7, and a number of all the projects that the city council thus far has allocated spending some of the funding on. So these projects total almost $16 million, and they vary from providing heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system improvements to some of our community spaces or facilities, to working with consultants to do plans like community needs assessments, as well as a blue-green New Deal, and then also to do infrastructure projects such as the North Richmond Pump Station, helping to upgrade the MLK Junior Turf Field, which is utilized a lot by our community, as well as provides a much needed match for a library infrastructure grant that we have, which we got a $10 million grant, and ARPA allowed us to match it to get an additional almost $5 million. So we have $15 million to eventually upgrade the inside of our library for safety and security. And then also the Richmond Housing Authority was able to utilize some funds to help do the Nevin Housing Project. So here's just some pictures of some of the ways in which we've been able to spend or will be spending some of our dollars. Later in May, we will be bringing our community needs assessment that was done, where we got input from our community, which includes city staff, about how the city council could spend the remaining dollars. So we have about 12 million left of ARPA funds, and we're trying to be strategic about how we spend those dollars. So we will be bringing information back to our city council at the end of May to share with them what we heard from community, so that they can make informed decisions about how to spend the remaining of those dollars, so that we can see projects implemented and built out by the end of 2026. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to finance.
Thank you, LaShonda. So this slide shows some of the pending or unfunded budget requests that were not, the city was not able to fund in the current fiscal year's budget. So as we move into the process for developing budget for next fiscal year, these are some of those items which we need to keep in mind, and the city needs to be focused and find ways to fund these or budget for these items. One of those, like about $15 million to invest in the city's declining paving index, which is deteriorating. And I have to sort of like dodge the potholes on my way to work every day. And that it's not my problem, obviously the community problem. Fire training center pre-development costs are pending to be determined. And library renovation to find about $50 million. Expected Measure revenue loss due to pending litigation, about $5 million in terms of one cleanup costs, and which all this adds up to at least $36.5 million without even the fire training center's redevelopment costs. So with this, we conclude our presentation and thank you for listening to us and we're open for questions.
I've been volunteering with Richmond Trees, planting street trees, and I've just become aware that we really need, the Parks Department needs more staff to take care of the trees that we do have and to give some guidance so they succeed over time. And I've been volunteering with Groundworks to train some people to become tree stewards. I'm really hoping that we can make an opening in the budget so we can fund something like that on a permanent, not a grant-based method.
Definitely, this is a great comment, and we made a note of that, and we'll definitely work with the respective department to make sure what we can do about in the next year's budget.
Is there going to be more funding for to fill positions like in the meter maid? Do you really need it? Okay. Do you need a I'm also concerned about getting the street sweeping up and running again, and the enforcement hasn't been happening, and the streets are just getting pretty dirty. So I'd like to make sure the staffing goes up for that again, so we can have the enforcement.
A point again, thank you so much for the feedback, and we made a note of that request, and will definitely be presented to the council with the community feedback. So we're really not, promising anything in this session. It's basically an engagement and inviting the feedback kind of exercise. Okay, so here's a question. Do you have the PowerPoint available online from anonymous attendee? Yes, we will have the presentation available online.
Many neighbors are concerned about the leakage of the Keller Beach sewer line into the bay. We are told that the current line is defective and that it is not possible to inspect, maintain, or repair a large portion of it. How will repair of this line be approached and financed?
We have Robert Armijo, Deputy Director of Public Works, addressing the concern about the problem.
Yes, my name is Robert Armijo. I'm the Deputy Public Works Director and the City Engineer. We're currently, we've commissioned a study, so we have a consultant currently looking at the problem. We have done one community meeting already to just address with the community our plans to first study the problem. Once we have an actual solution proposed, then we'll definitely have more communications with the public. And so yes, the problem has been identified. We're aware of the issues with the Keller Beach sanitary sewer, and we're looking at ways that the line can be replaced.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
For the ARPA funds, what other items can you use the ARPA funds on?
Great question. So the federal government, in their many pages of guidelines, they have various categories that specify what type of projects and programs you can spend ARPA dollars on. The majority of them are geared to making sure that the funds are getting into the hands of or providing support to individuals who are negatively impacted by COVID. So it really is about COVID relief of the negative impacts of COVID. There is one category which is called revenue loss, which is where all of our revenue, that's the category we actually are using. And that revenue loss category provides us much more flexibility and the work we have to do doesn't have to fit neatly within those other boxes. So that category allows us to spend funding on things that the city government would normally spend funds on. So it really is saying you lost some revenue as a result of COVID. We are giving it back to you. And what would you normally do as a government, which is why you see things from infrastructure like HVAC improvements, all the way to doing planning work, to actually providing some money into the hands of community residents who are negatively impacted by COVID. So it allows us to have much more flexibility. We still have to report it all. And so we're going to continue to move in that in that way in terms of how we're gonna spend the remaining dollars. But it will be a council decision to determine how they want to be able to do that. But every time a recommendation is made, we go back to the rules and regulations and check to make sure we're good. Hope that answers it. But for more specifics, please check out the City of Richmond's webpage about ARPA. Fun reading for you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.